Everybody. So tonight we have a very, very special guest, and we have Agnes on the show. Agnes, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I know you've wanted me to be a part of this. I'm just catching up to my messages. So I was like, oh, sure, today I'm free. Let's go ahead and do it.
It's a pleasure. And I know some of our listeners might not be familiar with your case. Do you want to just give a little background info about you and your case?
Sure. How I've honestly come to understand my case now, looking back, it all starts with, you know, everybody's story of just being abused by the justice system, being set up even before you walk into court. And then by the time you're in there, it's this whole maze. And me being from another country, I found that to be the biggest headache and heartache I had to face because I had to learn the legal system of a country that's not my own. It was completely foreign. And I was escaping domestic violence from my ex-husband who wanted me deported and separated from our son. He literally threatened me with that and made attempts of it. But because of powerful legislation like the Violence Against Women Act, I was able to get my lawful permanent residency in this country protected by that act. And that made him upset, such that now he said, whatever means necessary, I'm going to get the child and I'm still going to accomplish my mission of getting you deported. And that's where I came to see that plan unfold through our divorce judge. I sued him. He recused. The two other judges that came after him, they had the same agenda. They now involved the DA and his office and his prosecutors. It even went as far as the Tennessee Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. And it didn't end there. It went to the district court. Then it went to also the federal appeals court. And I'm over there just wondering, like, how is this happening? But then through education and exposure, you learn something called Darbo Dinan, reverse the victim to the offender. That's basically what came into play because I was always ahead and they wanted to rewrite the facts saying I'm the abuser and he is the victim. Like I literally have a federal magistrate say, oh yeah, I take concerns of domestic violence seriously, but Agnes, you're the abuser. I was like, wait a minute, what? When she wrote that in her report, she literally said, I'll take domestic violence seriously only because I think it's you and it's not him. You're the one. And I'm just like, okay, so that's discriminatory because now I'm viewing it as because of my nationality, that's why you're taking his side. That's the first thing. And then number two, because I'm a woman of color, you won't even, that makes it even worse because she's a white magistrate. But looking at all those things at play, then you realize that, there's something going on, but it's happening undercover. And that's where RICO comes in. And you realize what's basically happening to you is racketeering, is organized crime. And they're trying to hide it in plain sight.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people are getting more familiar with what RICO is. And a lot of people have seen with the YSL trials and now the Diddy indictments. And there's a lot of high profile cases where RICO is being cited on a criminal in a criminal sense. And I think that, what we're seeing a lot is civil RICO, where as civilians, we are able to bring a lawsuit because our rights are being violated as a result of racketeering. So, can you tell a little bit more about what's going on in Tennessee and what you've experienced going through the federal and state systems? And what type of racketeering are they doing?
Well, I saw a metric or statistic not so long ago that said Tennessee is one of the leading states of corruption in this country. And I definitely agree, having been in that state. I'm not in that state anymore. And what can I say? Tennessee, first of all, the cost of living is very high, and still minimum wage is still very low. I believe most places is still at 7.25. So from how I understood being in the eastern part of Tennessee, you're going to find a lot of poverty rates. And basically the system there is that, they have to keep the poor poor and the rich richer. And the rich have basically extended their influence into the courts. When I think of Tennessee, I would like people to think about the most trending lawsuits right now, the serial rapist Sean Williams and our police department that just got sued in the process and were exposed because one of the former federal uh, prosecutors who was working there, they fired her because she was simply trying to do her job and push for Sean Williams to be arrested. But they mocked her. They mocked her and they berated her, and it's a toxic culture. I've posted my own videos about Johnson City Police Department, but it's a culture of hatred towards women and children. They really don't care for our lives. And I think what's been even most frustrating for me in Tennessee is that when you see a woman in Tennessee occupying a position, most of the time she is a puppet. I am yet to find a woman in Tennessee that actually advocates for the best interests of women and children because we are in the minority here. But most of the women are basically puppets, they're silent, and they're just there to just allow things to just happen as they are. So even when it comes to the federal courts, I think you and I have had this conversation that federal courts are not the same. Washington, D.C. is not the same as any other state because some federal courts are really constitutional and others are not. So far from what I'm seeing, the Third Circuit, Second Circuit, even when you look at their decisions, you'll find some real good case law. And then when you go to other circuits like mine at the Sixth Circuit, we don't have good decisions that are powerful like that. So that's where you ask yourself then what's really going on. It's racketeering. Like my case has it has many moving parts to it, but one of them, which is the bank I'm exposing, is literally engaged in theft of motor vehicles by violating repossession procedures. The facts are clear on their face, but there's a federal judge who's protecting the bank from accountability and saying certain things that a federal judge should not be saying and just flat out denying it, even though the evidence shows as such. So racketeering in that case, because we've complained to the Federal Trade Commission, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, there are complaints there. There's a complaint with the Tennessee Department of Financial Institutions, because I was a victim of the theft of my own vehicle, because my ex-husband, who's also a customer of Eastman Credit Union, just went over there and that's RICO. I can just go over there and, go get her vehicle, and they came and picked it up, but they took advantage because of February 7 when I was arrested in court because they wanted to come in court. Then that becomes the arena for them to come after you. Literally, you are not safe, especially if you're by yourself, you can't afford an attorney, you'll be a target. You walk in there, there's a high chance you'll be arrested, you might face bodily injury, and false statements saying you were in contempt of court like me, and then next you know you're in custody of the state to cover the whole thing up because DAs, from how I understand them, they're not really coming after criminals. They come for law abiding citizens. That's been my experience with the DA in my county. So he's also part of the RICO enterprise. So that's basically my take on, RICO racketeering is it's just obstruction of justice, from the word like to obstruct. I mean, you're blocking somebody that they shouldn't have justice, they shouldn't be heard, and you'd rather see their life destroyed, is really what it is. So that's what RICO is. RICO is basically a bunch of lawless individuals saying we want to run, you know, the country, business, the court systems how we want it. Justice would be determined by us against you. But if there were bold enough, they would come in the light and do it, but that's where they know what they're doing is wrong. And they hide behind what? Judicial immunities, prosecutorial immunities. And that's why when you come out and you say what's going on, if you're by yourself, most people be like, they'll come in and then, try to shut you up, say, she's just mad that the judge is ruling. But if that judge was bought and paid for through bribery, it's more than just being upset at how a judge has ruled. The judge completely ignored your evidence, completely ignored your testimony. If that was even silencing you, I've seen some of the worst forms of racketeering out there whereby people's mics are being turned off and these judges are doing all they can because their goal is to sabotage the record and then say, oh, Theodora was disruptive, she was unruly, she was disorderly, so that people can see that. And then in some scenarios, you won't even be able to get the recording. They tell their clerks to lie, saying it was not recorded. There's no transcript. Or if there's a transcript, tamper with the transcript is what they're doing. So civil RICO, like you have said, people have seen criminal RICO, but civil RICO can get a little bit messy because that's where the immunities of judges and prosecutors, because those are the two big ones. It's like they feel that they're untouchable. It becomes harder as you're showing RICO, because then they'll be like, for judges, they've said they can exceed the jurisdiction. They can do things abusively, maliciously, and they're immune. So if you tell people such things and cite U.S. Supreme Court cases, you're basically giving them license to racketeer, and they'll be protected. So judicial immunity, even when you study RICO, protection is key to people in racketeering because that's where they're going to run to people like judges, the DA, or police departments. They offer the best protection for them. So yeah, civil RICO is there, but it's a battle to get it out there, depending upon what your state is and what your circuit is basically what I'm going to say.
Yeah, and I think that I've seen some of your videos where the clerk's office also will try to block you. And, if they see that you're recording or if they see that you're trying to hold them accountable, they get extremely angry. I've even seen where they've mentioned to you about your TikToks and told you to your face that we know you're posting, we see your posts. And I think that it creates so much bias when once they sort of flag you as somebody who is speaking up for your rights and standing up for yourselves. um it's almost like the whole system gets notified, like, oh, watch out for this person, she's bad news, we got her on our radar. And I think that you mentioned how they try to put you in jail, and you actually did get put in jail. How long did they put you in there for?
Oh man, I spent, well, I wasn't in jail that long, but February 7th, I was arrested because of my VAWA status. The judge would tell you that's not true. But prior to the hearing, he did see the same VAWA that he said, show me a copy of. So he's already a liar right there. So the moment I talked about it, I was basically arrested because my ex-husband's attorney was telling the judge it's expired and it wasn't. And the judge was basically saying, well, I'm going to ask her the question, but she's not an immigration attorney. No, the immigrant. I should tell you if that, because I filed for it myself and it got approved. And, because of me basically exercising what I know now, my due process, my rights under the Equal Protection Clause, which is to give evidence, I went in jail. And I was assaulted whilst I was there by corrections officers. I was pepper sprayed, you know, and I basically was then brought back after the judge had declared his recess to have a whole proceeding with handcuffs. So I wasn't able to write, none of that. But luckily, I had a little recording device. However, its battery died, but it recorded just enough the torture that I went through. And then, because I had a hearing from like 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. That is weird as a divorce child custody case. From 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., around 7:30, I was put into contempt 24 hours because I objected to the use of my lawsuit that exposed the racketeering of the Tennessee Court of Appeals and its staff. And the Attorney General never showed up. So because he never showed up, they were so mad And that's what the Sixth Circuit Court basically also became a center of racketeering. And now they basically gave the instruction, which is for Judge Wright to put me in jail and for me to be harmed because of that appeal, because it did have a trace that I've been there, because that's the only thing I wanted to do is to spread my name everywhere and even make my TikTok videos so people can actually see what I'm saying. Like you said, and they started getting upset because, that's why I encourage people just put that video because there've been other victims and we have social media. They didn't have a say, so the media came to speak for them. And that's why the media is getting mad because when you make your own video and you speak what's going on, especially if you speak very clearly, it can cause something else, to happen, a chain reaction, because it's very important to speak out. So I went to jail then. I also spent time doing fraudulent contempt, I think, October 30th to the 5th of November. And that was in relation to even one of my TikTok videos that I posted. There was a clerk there testifying because the judge was upset because she threatened me. She threatened my livelihood at my apartment, which then I finally did December the 6th, December 26th. Now I did other fraudulent contempt charges. They wanted my income information so they can revoke my fee waivers. But I said, no, I'm not going to provide you with that because even though I'm indigent, they still want to revoke it, which is extortion. And I said, I'd rather be in jail than do that. But prior to that, I was just whisked away from my apartment and just, grabbed, no underwear, no shoes, just grabbed. I was injured even then on my arm, you know, I had a bruise there, but just savages upon savages. And my property manager joined into the racketeering conspiracy, knowing that they received subsidized HUD funding for the Violence Against Women Act. That became a scandal in and of itself as well, because I'm protected from eviction. But they did that to me, and that's why I brought them to federal court. So yeah, you'll spend a lot of jail time by racketeers because their goal is to punish you for fighting back and speaking out, which is very strange.
Yeah, and I think that like the conditions that in a lot of these jails and prisons are, we can agree, inhumane and just absolutely terrible. And most of all, when you're in there, you have no access to the internet. You have no access to resources. Even if you want to file a motion or a lawsuit or anything to try to help yourself, you're at such a disadvantage compared to somebody who's not in jail. And I think that they realize that. And they use these processes like, these bench warrants that are, not based on anything. And they also will do stuff like you said, like with the contempts. And I think it's intimidation because a lot of times they will deny a Zoom hearing and force you to go in person, not because they need you in person, but because they want to intimidate you and have the marshals stand behind you. So anything that you say that they don't like, immediately they can lock you up right then and there. Versus on Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
then they can't. And if it was really about the legal issues, if it was really about the merits of the situation, then they would do it on Zoom. But when they demand that you show up in person, and even like in my case, where I had gotten ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act accommodations approved, saying all of my hearings would have to be on Zoom, they approved that. And then later turned around and said, no, you have to come in person because we want to get you on a warrant. And it's like, okay, well, just add that to the other charges. You don't need me to come in person unless your goal is to just lock me up and make it so I can't come out and shut me up and silence me. And I think people with RICO too need to understand it's not just actions that they're doing like bribery and extortion, but it's also omissions. Like when these people see what's going on and they don't do anything to stop it, it's like obstruction of justice in a different way. And they're also complicit. So it's just ridiculous. And I think that it's admirable because you have taught yourself so much as a pro se and you've clearly done a lot of research on your own what would you say that you would, how would you give some advice to somebody else who might not be able to afford an attorney and wants to navigate being pro se?
Well, I have made prior videos in the past, but I tend to just, I guess, repeat myself again. But there are excellent, excellent books and resources for those that really want to learn a crucial part, which is legal writing. So for me, I knew early on, because I used to be the typical pro se that if I just spill my story out there somehow, the judge would be moved and whatnot. But unfortunately, that's not how the law is. So I had, she's passed, sadly. She was a paralegal and she mentored me a little bit. She's the one that actually introduced me to something called case law. And she told me, Agnes, you need to have the case law. And I simply asked her, what is that? And then, that was in the beginning, I believe, of my very first appeal in the appeals court. And that's when I started my journey to learning how to legally write on case law. And I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And that's when I discovered the Brent Carr versus Kelly Carr appellate case, where they clearly ruled that domestic violence on its own, you shouldn't have custody of a child. And that's one case I've been singing the same song about, but they've been ignoring me, even though it is binding precedent. But it's very important for pro se litigants to know case law and to read it and to understand it. Because it makes a difference, points and authorities. But at the trial court, they can do whatever they want. They could care less if they even quote the law in there. If you're going to higher courts, like appellate courts, you need to know points and authorities, which is the case law. So I strongly recommend books by Ross Huberman. This point made and this point taken. One is gray and one is orange. And he teaches judges how to write their own opinions. So he teaches them. So I read his book, and that was really helpful to get a breakdown of that. I've also told people about Georgetown. Georgetown law has a section where they have little PDFs and printables that literally teach you this, how to build a table of authority through Microsoft Word, how to write persuasively, because that's the thing. In law, you're not just writing to write, you're writing persuasively. You have to write to persuade. So some people don't know what that is. But Georgetown has excellent PDFs. I read those. They were a lifesaver for me because I was in the appeals school and I was told to write a brief. And I didn't like the pro se brief because I knew my case had a lot of moving parts. So those are free resources available. Court Listener, if you want to look for case law. And if you're using like Court Listener, there's the Harvard Case Law Project. You can research about 500 cases per day. That's a good resource. And there's something called, I think it's called what, Boolean operators. So if you're doing research on case law, it's important to know, you need to Google it. It's called a Boolean operator because it'll help you shift certain cases that you want to read. For example, you may want to use quotation marks like child custody, one word. You search by that. Then you use capital letter and, child custody and modification in quotation marks and parenting plan. It means when it shows you cases, it's going to show you opinions that basically have child custody, modification, parenting plan only. So that allows your search to be more refined. But that's something, again, you have to learn how those operators work. There's and, there's or, there's quotation marks. If you just look that up, I have made a video prior and I show people this, you'll be able to then now navigate versus wasting time in the beginning like I was with case law until I learned that you could do that. So there's that option, but you can read the case law. Um, I'm also looking at other resources. Also read, like when you read opinions that judges have posted, pay attention to how they write, and you would really want to write like that, straight to the point. Headings, all of those things matter in the law. So I used to dedicate 30 minutes to an hour every day since May of 2022 to learn the law. Every day I had to read something, read a book. I had to do that for me to be where I am today. So it can be done, definitely. But there are free resources, podcasts. Listen to some good legal podcasts. My favorite one or favorite ones are The Game Changing Attorney. I like that one. I love when Johnny Depp's attorney came on there and she was talking about cross examinations and witnesses, her tips and tricks. So a good podcast will help you. I like the California Appellate podcast, even though it's in California, they teach you about the appellate process. You can learn a few things, standard of review, and all of those things. So podcasts are there. Go to your law library, go read over there. There are also resources there for you. So as a self-represented litigant or even a law student such as yourself, I feel like we're living in a wonderful time where it's out there for you to see. Look up PDFs online. All you gotta do is just type motion for this PDF. It'll give you a sample, kind of see how that motion looks like. But everything is, chat GPT has come a long way with that case law because people were being sanctioned for it giving, fake cases. But now chat GPT is very accurate when it gives you case law. And I use it all the time. I show people, look at what this little resource can do. So definitely having Chat GPT will help you greatly along with some things I just research quickly, and it will give me the answers that I want there and then. So those are basically my tips, on that.
Yeah, I definitely think that AI can be a huge help, especially when you're trying to narrow things down. And another one is Perplexity AI. I think I like it a little better
Mm.
than ChatGPT. And
Oh, I didn't know
yeah,
about that one.
yeah, they have a free version and a premium one, and it's pretty good because sometimes you can say in ChatGPT, "Oh, draft me this or that," and it'll say, "Sorry, I can't help you." But if you say the same thing in Perplexity, it'll do it. So,
Mm.
sometimes it's good to try a few different ones and put them inside and see what it spits out, and then, see what gives you the best results. But we only have a few minutes left. So, is there anything that you would want to leave with parents, like as a final thought to keep in mind, especially for those who are considering suing a judge for violations of their constitutional rights?
Yes, absolutely. My final thoughts is I tell people go outside because trial courts they lock you in. Appeal. How even like they provide you a pro se form, sue over there. Whatever you have to do to put yourself out there, please do it and put that judge's name because it will leave a trace. Because even though it's not really just you, there's a lot of us. And even if one of us can get a hit, then it benefits us all. But you making your TikTok videos is important. I repost them. I'm familiar to them. Some of them, like I posted of the ongoing situation with a judge in Kentucky when I talked about how there's some nepotism laws possibly being violated. It's because somebody else is in Kentucky, and that's a big thing. In her case, she's trapped with the up church, you know, the DA, her, the attorney, the judge, all of them up church everywhere, and they're holding her daughter hostage from her. So that's, RICO criminal enterprise involving nepotism. So I encourage people to do everything you can, make TikTok videos, you know, go on podcasts, spread the word about your story, but never give up because their end goal is to control the narrative. So as long as you speak out, then you rob them of that power because that's what scares them is when you stop speaking out and taking action.
And how long has it been since you saw or spoke to your son?
September 29th will be officially 2 years, but it's also at the same time the year when I've actually made a lot of progress towards getting him back because that's where now as I posted in my latest appeal, my documents are now out because they lied on my mental health, and I have documents since November 13th of 2013 vacating those falsehoods, and nobody wants to touch them. So once they're vacated, I can technically see my son again, and my ex-husband's attorney defaulted. So I'm trying to now move on the next steps there. But this is now also the opportunity when I can have progress to getting him back. So that makes me pretty excited because they tried to fight me, but that's why I said the appeal was very successful for me, just to bring those documents out there because they were trying to hide.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. And I'm always thinking of you. And I can't wait for the day when you finally post your son coming home and justice and winning these cases. And what's your TikTok username so everyone can follow you?
Sure, it is Agnes McCurry 96. You can find me on there. I talk about my case. I also just talk about other people's cases as well as teaching some legal concepts and the same resources that people can look for in order for them to do some of the things I'm doing.
Awesome. Thank you again so much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and best of luck with everything.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Theodore. Have a wonderful evening.